first rule of transporting a prisoner across the Badlands of Helios is never to trust what they say. The second rule is to always keep your gun close. It was the third rule I'd forgotten. Never take the shortcut through Devil's Basin during storm season. But Marshal Abram Reed doesn't make rookie mistakes. At least, that's what I kept telling myself as the blood-red dust swirled around us, thick as sin and twice as mean. We're lost, aren't we, Marshal? The voice behind me was calm, almost amused. I didn't turn around. Didn't give him the satisfaction. Just adjusted my filtration mask and squinted at the horizon, where twin suns were setting like dying embers through the haze. Shut up, Vance. Elias Vance. The most wanted man this side of the Outer Rim. Murderer. Thief. Revolutionary, depending on who you asked. And my final assignment before retirement. 3 more days. 3 days until I could turn in my badge, collect my pension, and leave this God-forsaken rock forever. But first, I had to deliver this man to New Cheyenne for his appointment with the gallows. That storm's getting worse, Vance observed, his voice muffled by his own mask. The colony had given him a cheap one, barely kept the dust out, let alone the radiation. His hands were bound in front of him with magnetized cuffs, the kind that would shock you unconscious if you tried to separate them more than 6 inches. I pulled on the reins of my dust mare, the genetically engineered beast snorting through its specialized nostrils. The creature was worth more than most colonists made in a year, but it could navigate the Badlands better than any rover. Vance rode behind me, his cuffs linked to my saddle by a short chain. We need shelter, I admitted finally. Basin's too wide to cross before nightfall now. Thought you knew these parts, Marshal. There was that hint of amusement again. For a man headed to his death, Vance seemed remarkably unconcerned. I do. I scanned the crimson landscape, looking for the telltale signs of an abandoned mining outpost or homestead. Better than most. But not as well as some. It wasn't a question. The dust mare whinnied, her 6 nostrils flaring as she sensed something ahead. I followed her instinct, guiding her toward what looked like a jagged tear in the landscape. As we got closer, I saw it was a ravine, maybe 30 feet deep, with the remnants of an old water processing station built into one side. We'll shelter there for the night, I decided. Whatever you say, Marshal. Vance shifted in his saddle. You're the one with the gun. I helped him dismount, keeping the chain taut between us. Up close, in the dying light, I could see his features better. He wasn't what I expected. Colony propaganda showed him as a monster, a brute with dead eyes. But the man before me had intelligent eyes, lines around his mouth that spoke of laughter rather than cruelty. The processing station was half buried in red dust, but its reinforced door still held. I pressed my badge against the scanner, Marshal's override, and the ancient mechanism groaned to life, sliding open just enough for us to slip inside. The air was stale but clean. I removed my mask and took a deep breath, watching as Vance did the same. His face was streaked with sweat and dust, but he seemed relieved to be out of the storm. Home sweet home, he said, looking around at the abandoned equipment and empty storage containers. I secured his chain to a heavy pipe running along the wall, giving him just enough slack to sit comfortably, but not enough to reach me while I slept. Then I set about making camp, unrolling my sleeping mat and setting up the portable heater. The nights on Helios dropped well below freezing, even in the summer months. You know, Vance said as I worked, For a man about to retire, you don't seem very happy. I ignored him, focusing on preparing our rations. The colony-issued food was bland but nutritious. Protein cubes that tasted vaguely of chicken if you used enough hot sauce. 30 years wearing that badge, he continued. That's what they said at my trial. Marshal Reed has served the colony faithfully for 3 decades. They made it sound like you were some kind of hero. I handed him a portion of food, careful to stay out of reach. Eat. We've got a long ride tomorrow. He accepted the meal, but didn't start eating. What will you do? After, I mean. That's none of your business. Fair enough. He took a bite, grimaced at the taste. But I'm curious. Man like you, dedicated his whole life to the law. What's waiting for you on the other side? I sat down across from him, keeping my pistol visible on my hip. Why do you care? Vance shrugged. Just making conversation. It's a long way to New Cheyenne, and I'd rather not spend it in silence. Well, I would. I started eating, trying to ignore the way he studied me. The storm outside intensified, howling like a wounded animal as it battered the station. Dust seeped through the seals around the door, creating small red piles on the floor. The heater hummed, casting long shadows across the walls. You ever wonder, Vance said after a while, if what you're doing is right? I looked up sharply. I enforce the law. Right and wrong don't enter into it. That's a convenient way to avoid responsibility. His voice was soft, not accusatory. The law isn't always just, Marshal. You know that better than most. You killed 12 people at the governor's gala, I said flatly. That's not a matter of perspective. Vance set down his food, his cuffed hands resting in his lap. Is that what they told you? I saw the evidence. You saw what they wanted you to see. He leaned forward, the chain between his cuffs clinking softly. Do you know why I was at the gala that night? I didn't answer, but something in his gaze held me, prevented me from dismissing him outright. I was invited, he said, as a representative of the outer settlements. We were supposed to discuss water rights. The aquifer under New Cheyenne supplies the entire region, but the colony keeps cutting our allocation. People are dying, Marshal. Children are dying of thirst while the governor's guests sip champagne. So you decided to kill them all? Make your point with blood? I didn't set that bomb. His eyes never left mine. I was framed. The real target was the settlement representatives. All of us in one place. Convenient. I'd heard this before. Every prisoner had a story, an excuse, a conspiracy theory to explain away their crimes. But something about the calm certainty in his voice made me uneasy. Why would the governor want to kill settlement representatives? I asked, playing along. Because we discovered something. Vance lowered his voice, though there was no one else to hear us. The water shortage isn't natural. They're diverting the aquifer, selling our water off-world to the highest bidder. Helios is dying, Marshal, and they're profiting from its death. I stood up abruptly. Get some sleep. We move at first light. But as I turned away, he said something that stopped me cold. You grew up in the outer settlements, didn't you? Before you joined the Marshals. I turned back slowly. How do you know that? Your accent slips sometimes, when you're tired or angry. He smiled faintly. No one from New Cheyenne pronounces water the way you do. Besides, colony-born don't usually become marshals. Too soft. He was right, though I'd spent years trying to hide my origins. The outer settlements were looked down upon, considered backward and lawless. I'd worked hard to escape that stigma, to prove myself worthy of the badge. My past doesn't change anything, I said firmly. You're still going to New Cheyenne to face justice. Justice. Vance repeated the word like he was tasting it. Tell me something, Marshal. In all your years wearing that badge, have you ever seen true justice in New Cheyenne? I didn't answer. Instead, I checked his restraints one final time and retreated to my sleeping mat on the other side of the room. But sleep eluded me, his words echoing in my mind like the howling storm outside. Morning came with eerie silence. The storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Dunes had shifted, landmarks buried or revealed, the world rewritten in crimson and gold. Vance was already awake when I rose, sitting with his back against the wall, watching me with those unsettlingly perceptive eyes. Storms past, he noted. I checked my nav unit, frowning at the readings. We're off course. Need to head northeast to intercept the main trail. Through the spine? Vance raised an eyebrow. That's risky. The spine was a jagged ridge of rock formations, treacherous but passable if you knew the way. It would save us half a day compared to going around. I know what I'm doing. I packed up our camp efficiently, securing everything to the dust mare's saddlebags. Once outside, the full impact of the storm was evident. The ravine was half filled with dust, making the climb out easier, but confirming how completely the landscape had changed. I helped Vance mount, then swung up behind him, reversing our positions from yesterday. Better to keep him in front of me now that the terrain was more challenging. You know, he said as we started riding, most marshals would have sedated me for this journey. Easier to transport an unconscious prisoner. I'm not most marshals. No, he agreed. You're not. You actually want to hear what I have to say. I want you to shut up and focus on not falling off this mare. But he was right. I could have kept him drugged, silent. Part of me wanted to hear his story, even if I didn't believe it. 30 years enforcing colony law had shown me enough to know the system wasn't perfect, but I'd always believed it was necessary. Order in the chaos of a frontier world. The spine loomed ahead, a series of twisted rock formations jutting from the desert floor, like the vertebrae of some ancient beast. The path through was narrow, barely wide enough for the dust mare in places, with sheer drops on either side. Watch yourself, I warned as we entered the first passage. One wrong step, and neither of us makes it to New Cheyenne. Would that be so terrible? Vance asked quietly. I didn't respond, focusing on guiding the mare through the treacherous terrain. The rock here was different from the rest of the Badlands, darker, almost black in places, with veins of some glittering mineral running through it. Stellarium, Vance said, noticing my gaze. That's why they settled Helios in the first place, worth more than gold back on Earth. I know my history, but do you know your present? He shifted slightly, looking back at me. The Stellarium mines were supposed to be depleted decades ago. That's the official story. But they're still mining it, secretly, using prison labor. I'd heard rumors, of course. Every marshal had. But rumors were cheap in the Outer Rim. If you're trying to convince me to let you go, I'm trying to make you see. His voice took on an urgent quality. The same people who framed me are the ones you've served faithfully for 30 years. They're bleeding this planet dry and leaving the settlers to die. A sound cut through the air, a high-pitched whine that didn't belong in these empty badlands. I reined in the mare, scanning the sky. Skimmer, I muttered, spotting the sleek shape against the cloudless blue. Colony patrol. No. Vance tensed in front of me. That's not a patrol. Look at the configuration. He was right. The vehicle was too small, too fast. No colony markings. Bounty hunters, I suggested, already urging the mare into a narrow crevice between two rock formations. Or assassins, Vance said grimly. The governor doesn't want me to reach New Cheyenne alive. Why would... I began, but cut myself off as the skimmer circled back, clearly having spotted us. Because I can prove what they did, Vance said quickly. The evidence is encrypted, hidden. I'm the only one who knows where and how to access it. Dead, I'm just a terrorist who got what he deserved. Alive and on trial, I'm a threat. The skimmer was descending now, its engines kicking up clouds of dust. I could see armed figures inside, their intentions clear. I made a split-second decision, spurring the mare deeper into the maze of rock formations. The spine was too narrow for the skimmer to follow directly, but they could land and pursue on foot. You believe me now? Vance asked, as we galloped through the twisting passages. I believe someone wants you dead, I replied. That doesn't make you innocent. We emerged onto a plateau, the mare's 6 legs churning up dust as she ran. The skimmer appeared overhead again, and this time a shot rang out, the energy pulse striking rock just feet from us. I drew my sidearm, returning fire while simultaneously guiding the mare toward a narrow gap in the rocks. Another shot came closer, singing the mare's flank. She screamed, an unsettling, almost human sound, and lurched sideways. Hold on! I shouted as we careened toward the edge of the plateau. The mare regained her footing at the last moment, plunging into the gap just as more shots peppered the ground behind us. The passage was dark and tight, forcing us to slow to a walk. I could hear the skimmer circling overhead, unable to follow but unwilling to give up. They'll be waiting when we come out, Vance said, breathing hard. We're not coming out. I guided the mare deeper, following an instinct born from years in these badlands. Not where they expect anyway. The passage widened slightly, then began to slope downward. The light faded, leaving us in near darkness. I activated the mare's bioluminescent features, her mane and tail beginning to glow with a soft blue light. The underneath, Vance whispered, recognition in his voice. I thought it was just a legend. The underneath was a network of caves and tunnels beneath the spine, known to few and mapped by none. I'd stumbled upon it years ago while pursuing a fugitive, and had kept the knowledge to myself. An ace in the hole for emergencies. It's real enough, I said. And it'll take us past their ambush. The tunnel continued its descent, opening occasionally into vast chambers where luminescent fungi clung to the walls and ceiling, bathing everything in ghostly blue-green light. Water dripped somewhere in the distance, a precious sound on a world where surface water was virtually non-existent. This changes things, doesn't it? Vance said after we'd been riding in silence for some time. I didn't answer immediately, still processing the implications of the attack. Colony officials wouldn't send bounty hunters after a prisoner already in custody. If Vance was telling the truth about being framed. Someone wants you dead, I acknowledged finally. That doesn't mean I believe everything you've told me. Fair enough. He was quiet for a moment. What will you do now? It was the question I'd been avoiding. My duty was clear. Deliver the prisoner to New Cheyenne. But if powerful people within the colony wanted him silenced. My job, I said firmly, get you to New Cheyenne. To die without ever telling my side of the story? There was no fear in his voice, only resignation. To stand trial, I corrected, where you'll have the chance to present your evidence. He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed through the cavern. You really think they'll let that happen? The same people who just tried to kill us both? I had no answer for that. We continued through the underneath in silence. The mayor's glowing presence, our only guide in the darkness. We emerged from the underneath as dusk was falling, the twin suns casting long shadows across the desert. According to my nav unit, we were less than a day's ride from New Cheyenne, having bypassed much of the Badlands through the cave system. I found a sheltered spot between two large boulders and set up camp, securing Vance as I had the night before. The mayor needed rest after our harrowing escape, and I needed time to think. They'll be watching the approaches to the city, Vance said as I prepared our evening meal. We won't make it within a mile of the gates. I know these Badlands better than they do, I replied, though I shared his concern. There are ways into New Cheyenne that don't appear on any map. And then what? He accepted the food I offered, his cuffed hands steady. You deliver me to the same people who want me dead. How long before they decide you know too much as well? The thought had occurred to me. If what Vance said was true, if powerful people within the colony government were involved in corruption and murder, then my 30 years of service might not protect me. What would you have me do? I asked, frustration bleeding into my voice. Let you go? Become a fugitive myself? I would have you seek justice, Marshal. His eyes held mine. True justice, not the kind dispensed by corrupt officials in New Cheyenne. I looked away, unable to hold his gaze. Justice isn't simple out here. No, he agreed softly, but it is necessary. We ate in silence after that, the weight of decision heavy between us. The night grew cold, stars appearing in the clear sky above. Helios had few native predators, but the silence of the Badlands was oppressive in its own way. Tell me about the evidence, I said finally. What exactly do you have? Vance set aside his empty plate. Financial records, communications, proof that Governor Harding and his inner circle have been selling water rights to off-world corporations for personal gain, and evidence that they planned and executed the bombing at the gala to silence the settlement representatives who had discovered their scheme. And this evidence is where? Encrypted and hidden in multiple locations. He smiled faintly. I was a data security specialist before I became a terrorist. The files are secured with biometric locks. They need my retinal scan and voice authorization to access. Which is why they need you dead rather than just imprisoned, I reasoned. Dead men can't provide biometric authentication. Exactly. I considered this. If what you're saying is true, why not release this evidence publicly? Why keep it hidden? Insurance, he said simply. As long as they know I have it, but don't know where it is, I stay alive. Or I was supposed to. He gestured to his current situation. I underestimated their desperation. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. I'd served the colony faithfully for 3 decades, believing in the system, in the law. But I'd seen enough corruption over the years to know Vance's claims weren't implausible. If I help you, I said slowly, if I believe you, What then? What's your plan? Hope flickered in his eyes. There are people in New Cheyenne, journalists, honest officials, who would act on this information. We just need to get it to them safely. And after, what happens to you? He shrugged. Justice, I hope. A fair trial, at least. I didn't set that bomb, but I'm not innocent of everything the colony accuses me of. I've smuggled water to the settlements, stolen colony property, damaged mining equipment. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'm a criminal, Marshal, just not the one they say I am. I stood up, needing to move, to think. The badge on my chest felt heavier than it ever had. 3 days until retirement. 3 days until I could walk away from all of this. But could I walk away knowing what I now suspected? Get some sleep, I told him. We'll figure this out in the morning. But as I lay on my sleeping mat, staring up at the alien constellations, I already knew what I had to do. 30 years wearing the badge had taught me one thing above all. The law was meant to protect people. If the law itself had become corrupt, then true justice demanded something else. Dawn broke clear and cold over the Badlands. I'd made my decision during the long night, turning possibilities over in my mind, until only one path remained. Vance watched silently as I packed up our camp, his expression cautious, as if afraid to hope. Here's how this is going to work, I said, approaching him with the key to his cuffs. I'm going to remove these. You're going to show me this evidence of yours. If I believe it, we'll take it to people who can use it. If I don't, I let the implication hang in the air. And if I try to run? He asked. I patted my sidearm. I've been tracking fugitives across these Badlands since before you could walk. Don't test me. He nodded, extending his hands. I unlocked the cuffs, watching as he rubbed his wrists where the metal had chafed. Thank you, he said simply. Don't thank me yet. I gestured to the dust mare. We still have to get into New Cheyenne undetected, access your hidden evidence, and deliver it without getting killed. I'm not betting on our odds. Better than they were yesterday. He climbed onto the mare without assistance, his movements stiff after days in restraints. I mounted behind him, but didn't immediately spur the mare forward. One more thing, Vance. If you're lying to me, if this is some elaborate escape plan, I will find you, and what the colony would do to you will seem merciful compared to what I'll do. He turned slightly, meeting my gaze. I understand, Marshal, but I'm not lying. I believed him. God help me. After 30 years of suspicion and cynicism, I believed this convicted terrorist over the government I'd served my entire adult life. We rode toward New Cheyenne as the suns climbed higher, taking a route that skirted the main approaches to the city. Vance directed me to a seemingly unremarkable area of the Badlands, where a small ravine cut through the red earth. There, he said, pointing to a narrow crevice in the ravine wall. The first cache is hidden inside. I helped him dismount, then followed him to the crevice. It was barely wide enough for a man to squeeze through, opening into a small cave beyond. Inside, Vance moved with purpose, locating a loose stone and removing it to reveal a small, metallic container. The container required both his retinal scan and a complex verbal passphrase. When it finally opened, it contained a single data crystal, glowing faintly with stored information. This is it? I asked, skeptical. Part of it. He carefully secured the crystal in a protective case. There are 2 more caches, one in New Cheyenne itself, one in the settlement where I grew up. Together, They contain everything needed to expose the governor and his allies. I took the crystal from him, examining it before tucking it securely into an inner pocket of my jacket. Let's get the second one, then. New Cheyenne loomed on the horizon as we approached, its massive walls a stark contrast to the natural landscape. Unlike the crude settlements of the outlands, the colony capital was a testament to human engineering. A fortress city built to withstand both the harsh environment and potential attacks. There's a maintenance tunnel, I explained as we drew closer, used by water technicians to access the external pumping stations. The security is minimal. They rely on the fact that few people know it exists. And you know about it because I've brought in my share of smugglers over the years, I said. Learned their routes, their methods. Knowledge I never officially shared with my superiors. Vance raised an eyebrow but didn't comment further. We left the dust mare hidden in a shallow cave, continuing on foot to reduce our profile. The maintenance tunnel entrance was concealed beneath an outcropping of rock, marked only by a small colony utility sign, weathered almost to illegibility. The door required a standard maintenance code, something I'd memorized years ago and which, surprisingly, hadn't been changed. The tunnel beyond was narrow and dimly lit, smelling of dust and machinery oil. "Where's the second cache?" I asked as we made our way through the tunnel. "Water treatment facility," Vance replied. "Central to their scheme. They've been altering the flow data to hide the diverted water." The tunnel eventually opened into a larger maintenance area beneath the city proper. From here, we could access various infrastructure systems without entering the main city streets. The water treatment facility was 3 levels up, accessible via service ladders. We moved cautiously, avoiding the occasional maintenance worker. My marshal's uniform provided some cover. Colony workers were accustomed to not questioning authority, but Vance's presence was harder to explain if we were discovered. The water treatment facility was vast, a cathedral of pipes and filtration systems that processed the precious liquid drawn from deep beneath the planet's surface. Vance led me to a section marked Flow Regulation, where massive gauges monitored the water distribution to various sectors of the colony and outlying settlements. "There," he said, pointing to a maintenance panel near the floor. "Behind that." I stood watch while he removed the panel and retrieved another data crystal, this one blue rather than the red of the first. The process took longer than I was comfortable with, each passing minute increasing our risk of discovery. "Got it," he said finally, securing the panel back in place. "Now we just need to—" A door opened at the far end of the chamber. 2 maintenance workers entered, engaged in conversation. They hadn't seen us yet, but would in moments. I acted instinctively, grabbing Vance and pulling him behind a large filtration tank. The workers passed by, their voices echoing in the cavernous space. "Third reduction this month," one was saying. "Settlements are going to start dying off if this continues." "That's the point, isn't it?" the other replied, his voice lower. "Governor wants that land. Can't take it by force, so they're just going to let the settlers die of thirst." Their voices faded as they moved to another section of the facility. Vance looked at me, his expression grim. "Believe me now?" he asked quietly. I did. God help me. Everything he'd claimed was falling into place, confirmed by the casual conversation of workers who had no reason to lie. "We need to get this information to someone who can use it," I said. Who did you have in mind? Marissa Chen, he replied, editor of the new Cheyenne Independent. She's been investigating the water shortages for years. With this evidence, she can break the story wide open. I knew of Chen by reputation, a thorn in the colony government's side, persistent and incorruptible. If anyone would publish the truth regardless of consequences, it would be her. Her office is in the media district, I said. Getting there undetected won't be easy. We don't need to go to her office. Vance handed me the blue crystal. She lives in the East Side apartments. Less security, easier access. I took the crystal, securing it with the first. Lead the way. The journey through New Cheyenne's underbelly was tense, but uneventful. We emerged from a maintenance hatch into an alley in the residential district as evening fell, the city's lights coming on around us. The East Side apartments were middle-class housing, neither the luxury of the governor's circle nor the squalor of the workers' quarter. Security was present, but minimal. A single guard at the main entrance, basic ID scanners. We can't just walk in, I observed, studying the building from across the street. No, Vance agreed. But there's a service entrance around back. Delivery personnel use it. My marshal's uniform again proved useful. The service entrance guard barely glancing at my badge before waving us through. Vance kept his head down, playing the role of a prisoner being transported, which, technically, he still was. Chen's apartment was on the 4th floor. We took the service elevator, avoiding the main lobbies where residents might question the presence of a marshal in his charge. "What if she's not home?" I asked as we approached her door. "Then we wait," Vance replied. "This is too important to entrust to anyone else." I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. This was the point of no return. Once we handed over the evidence, there would be no going back to my old life. No quiet retirement, no pension. I would become what I'd spent 30 years pursuing, a fugitive. Vance seemed to read my thoughts. "Having second thoughts, Marshal?" "No," I said, surprised to find it was true. "Just wondering how I didn't see this corruption sooner. Sometimes we only see what we're prepared to see." He gestured to the door. "The question is, what will you do now that your eyes are open?" I knocked. The woman who answered was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes that took in my uniform and Vance's presence in one quick glance. Recognition flashed across her face. She knew who Vance was. "Marshal," she said cautiously, "this is unexpected." "Miss Chen," I replied, "we need to speak with you, privately." She hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. "Come in." Her apartment was small but neat, the walls covered with news clippings and photographs, the workspace of a dedicated journalist. A large display screen showed multiple news feeds, all muted. "You're Elias Vance," she said, once the door was closed. "The gala bomber." "The alleged bomber," I corrected, surprising myself with how quickly I'd adopted Vance's perspective. "That's why we're here." I removed the data crystals from my pocket, placing them on her desk. "These contain evidence that Governor Harding and his associates framed Vance for the bombing. They also prove the colony government has been deliberately creating water shortages in the settlements by selling water rights off-world." Chen's eyes widened, darting between the crystals, Vance and me. "And you're bringing this to me because you'll publish it," Vance said simply, "regardless of the consequences." She picked up one of the crystals, examining it. "If what you're saying is true, this is explosive. The colony government will do everything in their power to suppress it. They already tried, I said, explaining our encounter with the skimmer in the spine. They want Vance dead before he can tell his story. And you believe him? She asked me directly. A career marshal turning against the colony? I thought about the 30 years I'd spent enforcing laws I'd never questioned, about the gradual decline of the settlements, the increasing desperation I'd witnessed on my patrols, about the workers in the water facility, casually discussing the deliberate starvation of outlying communities. Yes, I said firmly. I believe him. Chen nodded slowly. I'll need time to verify this, to prepare the story properly. We don't have time, Vance insisted. Once they realize I've reached New Cheyenne but haven't been delivered to the colony prison, they'll know something's wrong. Give me 12 hours, she countered. By this time tomorrow, the story will be public, broadcast to every screen in the colony and transmitted to off-world news networks. Once it's out, they can't contain it. I looked at Vance, who nodded reluctantly. 12 hours, but we need somewhere safe to wait. I have a colleague, Chen said, already moving to her communication terminal. He maintains a safe house for sources. No one knows about it except him and me. As she made arrangements, I found myself looking out her window at the city below. New Cheyenne gleamed in the evening light, beautiful and corrupt. For 30 years I'd protected it, believing in its promise of civilization on this harsh frontier world. Now I would help tear down its foundations of lies. The safe house was a small apartment in the workers' quarter, sparsely furnished but secure. Chen's colleague, a photographer named Torres, asked no questions, simply showed us in and left. What happens after? I asked Vance as we settled in to wait. After the story breaks? He sat heavily on the room's single chair. Chaos, initially. Denial from the governor, probably martial law. But eventually, if enough people demand answers, change. And us? He smiled faintly. You could claim I forced you to help me. Return to being the loyal marshal. I shook my head. No. That time is past. Then we run, he said simply. To the outer settlements, or off-world if we can manage it. There are places beyond colony control where people like us can disappear. People like us. The phrase struck me. How quickly I'd gone from lawman to fugitive, from enforcer to rebel. I never thought it would end this way, I admitted. 30 years wearing the badge, and here I am, throwing it all away in my final days. Not throwing it away, Vance corrected. Finally honoring what it truly stands for. Justice, not just law. We fell silent after that, each lost in our own thoughts as the hours ticked by. I dozed fitfully, decades of field work having taught me to rest when possible, regardless of circumstances. The sound of the door opening jerked me awake. I reached for my sidearm, but it was only Torres, his expression grim. You need to see this, he said, activating the room's display screen. The screen showed Chen's apartment, or what remained of it. The building was in flames, emergency responders swarming the scene. What happened? Vance demanded, on his feet now. Official report says gas leak, Torres replied, his voice tight with anger. But Marissa's apartment was electric. No gas lines. Chen? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Torres shook his head. They're saying no survivors, but she managed to send me this before. He held up a data crystal. A third one, green. A copy of everything you gave her, plus her initial analysis. She worked fast. We need to release it now, Vance said urgently. Before they can cover this up, too. Torres nodded. I have access to the Independence broadcast systems. We can send it system-wide within the hour. Do it, I said, and then we need to get out of New Cheyenne. As Torres worked, I checked my sidearm and the small pack of supplies I'd brought. We'd need to move quickly once the story broke. The governor's forces would lock down the city, searching for us. I know a way out, Vance said, reading my thoughts again. Through the water treatment facility. The main pipeline to the outer settlements is large enough to walk through in sections. Maintenance crews use it. It was a desperate plan, but we had few options. Once the truth was public, we would be the most wanted people on Helios. It's done, Torres announced, disconnecting from the broadcast terminal. Playing on every screen in the colony and transmitted to the off-world networks. They can't stop it now. As if in response, sirens began to wail across the city, the lockdown beginning. We had minutes, perhaps, before security forces began door-to-door searches. Go, Torres urged us. I'll create a diversion. Send them in the wrong direction. I clasped his hand briefly. Thank you. Just make sure her death wasn't in vain, he replied. Vance and I slipped out through a service corridor, making our way toward the water treatment facility as chaos erupted around us. Public screens showed scenes from the data crystals. Financial records, communications between the governor and off-world corporations, evidence of the deliberate bombing at the gala. The people of New Cheyenne were learning the truth, and their reactions ranged from shock to rage. In some areas, crowds were already forming, demanding answers. Colony security forces struggled to maintain order, their attention divided, which worked to our advantage. We reached the water treatment facility as night fell completely. The maintenance entrance was locked, but my marshal's override still worked. They hadn't had time to revoke my access. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet. Skeleton staff having abandoned their posts to join the growing unrest in the city. We made our way to the main pipeline junction, where massive tubes carried water to various destinations. This one, Vance said, pointing to a pipeline marked Outer Settlement Distribution. It runs all the way to Junction Station at the edge of the Badlands. The access hatch was designed for maintenance workers, just large enough for a person to enter. Beyond it, the pipeline stretched into darkness, the sound of flowing water echoing within. It's a long walk, Vance warned, and not entirely safe, but it's our best chance. I hesitated at the threshold, looking back at the city I'd served for 3 decades. From here, I could see the governor's tower, its lights still burning bright against the night sky. How long before those lights went out, I wondered. How long before justice finally came for those who had corrupted this colony? You having second thoughts, Marshal? Vance asked, echoing his question from earlier. I removed my badge, looking at it one last time before dropping it to the floor. It landed with a small, final sound. No, I said. And it's just Abram now. Marshal Reed died tonight. Vance nodded, understanding in his eyes. Where will you go, after we reach the settlements? I thought about it as we entered the pipeline, the hatch closing behind us. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, but also possibility. For the first time in 30 years, I had no orders to follow, no law to enforce except the one written in my own conscience. I don't know, I admitted, as we began our long walk through the darkness, water flowing around our feet. But for the first time in a long while, I'm looking forward to finding out. The first rule of transporting a prisoner across the Badlands of Helios is never to trust what they say. But sometimes, just sometimes, the prisoner speaks a truth that can set you both free.